What do you think about what's going on in the Charity right now? How do you feel about that, Sulayman Nyang?
Yeah, I think what the American people are witnessing at this particular moment in time is a study, a drama dealing with battle between two competing and contrasting novelties. Barack Obama's story is now very much part of the American narrative. Mitt Romney is a new novelty because his story parallels that of Kennedy in 1960. You have a Catholic running for the presidency of the United States. America never elected a Catholic president. Here you have a Mormon, even though Romney himself really doesn't really address the issue until belatedly. And that's going to follow him to the polls because you see many Americans, Christians and other groups who look at the narrative are going to hold him back because that's going to be, Obama has a race problem. Obama addressed that problem in Philadelphia, point blank, when he talked to the American audience, and he solved his problem that way. Romney did not dance around the issue of Mormonism, and that's going to be a problem for him in some American eyes, and I think I will stay at that level.
Witney, well, you are, of course, a very important player in this game. You happen to be on the committee to re-elect President Obama.
That's right. That's right. And I am an honor to be working with his foreign policy team to help get out the word of what he's accomplished in the Africa area, because I think it's not well appreciated. I think it's important to realize that no president has gone to Africa as soon as he did in his term, 7 months in. And the speech that he gave in Ghana, I think, really set the scene for much of what has followed. His commitment to democracy, his commitment to transparency, his willingness to reach out to the youth on the continent, I really think has embodied the hope and the promise that we're seeing on the continent. And this is translated into several important programs, such as Feed the Future, which is focused on increasing nutrition and food security and productivity of some 50 million African producers. And of course, trade and commerce. That has to be at the heart of the discussion. And the administration and Congress just extended the African Growth and Opportunity Act. The administration has committed to a seamless extension of AGOA when it expires in 2015. And why is this important? Because the relationship between Africa and the United States is changing in a very fundamental and positive way. AGOA has led to the creation of some 300,000 jobs in Africa, independent of aid, independent of development assistance. Last year, the United States exported $21 billion worth of products, goods, and services to Africa. That supports 100,000 jobs here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So no longer is the relationship one of donor-recipient, it's one of mutual benefit. And I think that's the foundation that we are seeing being put in place. And I think that's what a second-term Obama administration will build on. Mm-hmm. And that will be tremendously beneficial for Americans, tremendously beneficial for Africans.
Now, you alluded to his Ghana speech back in 2009, yeah. In which, of course, he talked about how Africa does not need big men. That right. What Africa needs are big institutions.
That's correct.
Correct? Or strong men,
correct.
Actually.
Correct.
Or strong institutions.
Right.
But what about some of his critics who will say, wait a minute, he simply talked the talk. He has not walked the walk.
Oh, I think he has very much walked the walk in Africa. I think if you look at our trade, you look at our investment, you look at our commitments to health. For instance, in 2008, there are 1.7 million Africans on antiretrovirals. It's almost 4 million today.
I'm talking about promoting democracy and human rights. Look at Ethiopia, for example. Unfortunately, you just had former Ethiopian Prime Minister Meles Zenawi dying, but there was nothing to talk about democracy in Ethiopia.
I think the president has been very clear in support of democracy. Look at the U.S. engagement in Sudan and South Sudan. The president personally was the driver to ensure that that referendum was held and that the commitments were honored and that South Sudan became independent. Look at Cote d'Ivoire. This administration played a very key role in ensuring that the results of that election were upheld.
Those are very good examples. But what about Uganda? What about Rwanda?
Look, the United States
What
cannot
about
fix...
Equatorial Guinea? What about Cameroon?
Right. You know, the list is long. The United States cannot solve every problem in the world. But I think the most important thing is to know is that this administration is committed to Africa, and it's investing in Africa, and it's investing in the continent's future. It's investing in the young people, it's investing in civil society, and it's up to those people to deliver democracy.
What about the fact that foreign policy, frankly, doesn't seem to be featuring so much in this particular election? It's about domestic policy. It's about the economy is stupid. It's jobs, jobs, jobs.
I think that's what we heard from Mitt Romney. Very little mention of foreign policy. He took a trip that I think by all accounts was pretty close to a disaster, going to London and Israel and Poland. But I think what was most startling was in his acceptance speech, virtually no mention of foreign policy, no mention of our troops who are engaged in 2 wars, no mention of their military service. I think we will hear a lot of foreign policy from President Barack Obama because that's very important to the United States. That's very important to what his administration has achieved. And we have to factor that in when Americans go to consider who they're going to vote for, is who is going to be the best at stewarding our nation in this very tumultuous world that we live in.
What about Osama bin Laden?
What about it? I mean, I think President Obama promised that he would hunt Osama bin Laden down, and he did it. I think he committed to pulling U.S. troops out of Iraq, and he's done that. He's doing that. And similarly to Afghanistan, winding down those wars. And I think that's the message, is that he put out a vision, he made promises, and he has delivered on those promises.
Yeah, very interesting.
You see, I think the point my colleague is making with regard to the Obama, you see, Americans like to use sports metaphors. And I can see Romney and his people suggesting that America needs a new coach. But actually, the devil you know best is better than a new devil. And I think that is where foreign policy comes in this election.
I would say the president you know best.
Well, I think that is what's going to happen with the American people. You see, I think the most important point here, really, for us to underline, is the fact that foreign policy was downgraded and not addressed. If you look at what happened in Tampa, what happened this time around is because the economy has become the dominant factor. And that's one of the reasons why the vice president, who is very knowledgeable about foreign policy himself, when he addressed the American population, he balanced it too. Just like my colleague is suggesting. Osama bin Laden is dead, General Motors survive. Yeah. That is the narrative from the vice president. So foreign policy and domestic policy were united by 2 words.
General Motors is alive. It used to be, of course, that whatever was good for General Motors was also good for America.
It's still good for America.
Still the same thing?
Our pride depends on the likes of General Motors. If you're an American and you're really thinking about America's position in this changing global system, the Chinese, the Indians, and you have BRIC and all these other countries coming up, General Motors was doing the relay race for America, together with Ford and others. The fact that the Obama administration was able to give life to the motor industry makes it very good for those industrialists as well as the labor unions.
Yeah. But I think it has changed. I mean, what's good for General Motors, obviously it's very good that President Obama saved Detroit and General Motors. But our economy is so much more complex than it was in 1950. And the kinds of companies and the breadth, and whether it's in high tech or services or retailing. And what's interesting to me is how increasingly U.S. companies are waking up to the opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa,
yes,
and becoming very adept at competing in that environment and bringing jobs and bringing technology and bringing a way of doing business that is solely inclusive and contributes to economic development on the continent.
Very interesting.